There's been a lot of news coming out of Israel lately, including a lot of controversy about things like protests, judicial reforms, and if you saw yesterday's program, misinformation about terrorist attacks and supposed settler violence and extremism, especially when the Israeli occupation is brutally oppressing poor innocent Palestinians. So on today's program, especially since we've been out of the studio a lot lately, I thought I'd take a few minutes to just obliterate some myths coming out of Israel, especially myths and misinformation and propaganda you've been seeing in the mainstream media. And instead, I'll tell you the real stories of what's happening here. I'm Luke, and this is the Israel Guys. Hello and welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Guys, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let me know if you're a new viewer down in the comments section below. So I want to play this video right off the bat and then we'll get an explanation.
I was just driving with a full bus of volunteers just arriving into Israel, coming through the town of Hawara, and what do you know? It's like terrorism, except for the fact that it was like a 12-year-old boy who hauls back a big rock and throws it at the bus, and, scared about 50 people for a minute until we realized, well, it's just a little boy throwing rocks at buses again. But yeah, literally that's what happened just now. Welcome to Israel for 50 people. That's what the 12-year-old had to give us.
So if you follow our social media, especially our platforms about our volunteer work in Israel, you may have seen that we just welcomed in more than 80 volunteers from all over the world for a 2-week program where they'll be helping small farmers in Judea and Samaria, specifically with the grape harvest, but a variety of projects. So they literally arrived from the airport yesterday. We had 50 people on one bus coming from the airport with all their luggage. And on their way here on the road, they had a young boy, maybe 12 years old, something like that, maybe older, throw a rock at the bus. And he happened to do some damage to one of the windows, as you saw in the video. Not to worry, all of the buses that we use and hire are fully armored. And thank God there was no chance of anybody being injured or the bus being seriously damaged. You can take rock throwings 2 different ways. One, you could say, I was a 12-year-old boy throwing rocks at an armored bus. What's to worry? Or, there could be an 18-year-old throwing a rock or a boulder from the top of a cliff on a private car and actually kill people. And actually, there was a 2-year-old, I believe it was a 2 or 3-year-old Israeli baby that was killed on one of the roads out here several years ago. So nothing to be trifled with. But I thought I'd share that with you guys. We do take every precaution with our volunteer programs. We do a lot of security and work with the local security and the IDF and things like that. We're usually always very safe, but occasionally, there are rocks thrown by 12-year-old boys from the side of the road. And thank God everybody's okay. So it is good to be back in the studio with you guys. I've been gone for 2 weeks, actually. Week before last, I was on vacation with my family, ironically up on the Lebanon border, right when all the news broke about a potential invasion by Hezbollah. Honestly, it was quieter there than it is sometimes in Judea and Samaria. So I wasn't worried about anything, and we had a wonderful vacation. And last week we were filming for 4 days straight, and that's why we didn't have any news programs coming out of the studio. So the good part about that is in the coming months, we have an incredible on-location series that'll be coming to you. I can't give too much away, but it has to do with, you know what? I'm not going to give too much away. It turned out really well. Film shoot went great, and we're super excited to bring you guys cutting-edge, very exciting content in the coming months. Again, guys, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let me know down in the comments if you are a new subscriber. So, you ready for some myths and then maybe real stories? We're going to talk about some just things that absolutely make me livid when it comes to the news about judicial reform here in Israel, because there's been multiple articles, mainstream media, videos that have come out that are absolute lies. There's some things that come out and it's just like twisted, and it makes me, it makes us like, oh, we got to go correct that and call out the mainstream media. There's things that come out sometimes that are just absolute lies, or they tell one tiny part of the story and they don't tell you the main part of the story. That's what I want to get into second half of today's show, so don't stop watching. But first, I thought this was interesting. Palestinian Media Watch, an NGO that calls out the Palestinian media, more or less. They watch the PATV and news in Arabic, and they translate it and hold them accountable wherever possible. They talked about so on August 1st, I believe, there's a 20-year-old Arab terrorist who wounded 6 Israelis outside a shopping mall in Ma'ale Adumim, just outside Jerusalem. Originally, when this terrorist attack happened, so just a little background, he was from Judea and Samaria. He had a permit for working in Ma'ale Adumim and actually had already worked there for several years. So August 1st, he decides, I'm going to go shoot up the mall, right? Close to where he works. So he shoots and wounds 6 Israelis. August 1st, he was neutralized by a nearby Israeli border police officer. The PA media, they then had to figure out, how do we report on this guy? Because as it turns out, didn't come out right at first, but as it turns out, he was actually planning to be a martyr. I know that's no surprise if you know what happens here in Israel, because now his family will go on salary from the Palestinian Authority, which comes from your American tax dollars if you're an American. But the PA had a hard time figuring out, how do we report this story? So for one official PA TV newsreader said, quote, a young person, i.e. the terrorist, was shot by the occupation and died as a martyr next to the town of Al-Azariah, east of occupied Jerusalem. Hebrew media sources claim that young Al-Mazars, the terrorist, shot at settlers at the entrance to the settlement of Ma'ale Adumim and wounded some of them. So they frame him as a martyr that was shot by the occupation, meaning Israel, okay? Now, another official Palestinian Authority TV reporter says, quote, the terrorist left behind an audio recording, and it is as if he is emphasizing his intention to die as a martyr, or he's taking a step towards the Palestinian resistance. So first, PATV starts reporting this guy's just a terrorist. He's a martyr that was shot and killed by the Israeli brutal occupation and died as a martyr. But then his colleague later on goes on to explain that, it was actually his intention to go die as a martyr. Actually taking a step toward the Palestinian resistance, which is just a euphemism for let's go out and kill some Jews. I just think it would be really tough to work for the Palestinian Authority media, because you're constantly have to fight this battle between, we're victimized by the brutal Israeli occupation, and no, actually they meant to get killed by the the IDF or the Israeli police, because they actually planned, they wrote letters. And another incident, I think it was on Josiah's show yesterday, they actually found like a Facebook posting where he actually posted, I'm going to go die as a jihadist martyr. And then he goes out and commits a terrorist attack, right? So they're caught between these two worlds. It would be tough. It'd be very tough to work for the PA media. Just must say that. Thankfully, we have people like Palestinian Media Watch who hold them accountable so that the English-speaking world knows what they're actually saying. You can check out the source link down in the description below if you want to read the actual article in Palestinian Media Watch. So, speaking of other myths, misinformation, I want to talk about judicial reform. And yes, I'm tired of this topic, but it's so horrific in the media because I went to Google the topic about what I'm about to tell you, and because I knew there was an alternate side to this story, so I went to find it on Google, and like 99% of the articles that came up were all IDF reservists refuse to serve in the military. 10,000 IDF soldiers sign letters saying they won't show up for military service. And then I finally found the one article I was looking for, and I'm gonna and it was linked to a Hebrew newspaper article. Both of them down below, so you can check them out. But I've been really incensed about this particular misinformation, particularly about the judicial reform process currently making its way through Israel's Knesset in a democratic process that was by the government that was voted in by the Israeli people in a democratic nation. But I've been very incensed because there's been so much misinformation. So you've probably heard this story. Hundreds, possibly thousands, maximum 10,000 IDF reservists have signed letters threatening to not show up for their reserve duty in the military. So first of all, a couple of quick things before I tell you the other side of the story. First of all, the majority of those who have threatened to not show up for military service are reservists. And many of them, it's actually being reported now. Maybe we'll find more information will come out about this soon. But many of them come from units who were a big part of evicting the Jews from Gush Katif in 2005. Majorly controversial move in Israel at that time, forcibly evicting 8,000 Jews from the Gaza area. So some of these guys, you could say they're on the liberal left. Also, a lot of them also being reported, much of them older, and probably not much good for military service anyway in the IDF. Secondly, they've threatened to not show up for reserve duty, which is usually like a few weeks, 1 month out of every year. By the way, if they actually don't show up for their service, their reserve duty, I'm pretty sure that's considered insubordination and is eligible for very harsh punishment. So they're threatening right now, okay? A lot of people think if it came down to it, if there was a war, if they were called up, they would probably show up, right? Because threats are many times empty. Now, for the real kicker, hold on to your seats. Active duty IDF soldiers and officers were so tired of the lies and the threats from their fellow reservists in the military that they put together a letter stating that they would always show up for their service and would never fail to serve their country. And it garnered 60,000 signatures in the first 24 hours. Now, I'm going to read you a translation of the letter. It says, quote, "We, women and men of the research division," the one particular part of the IDF where it came from, "declare that we will continue to serve our nation with love and devotion at all times, to defend the state of Israel under all governments. We will not refuse orders and will not set conditions for our reserve duty. All of us advocate the principles of democracy, free expression, and the rights of privacy. Among us are people of the left and the right, secular and religious, women and men. Our political opinions differ broadly, just as they did when we were full-time soldiers. We oppose bringing politics into the army and ask that Sahal, the army, remain the army of all of us." Now, tell me, did you hear this story in the mainstream media? I just told you, I had to look really well through Google and sort through all the misinformation to find this particular story. Did you hear it in the mainstream media? No, because it didn't fit very well in the narrative to hear that if there were maybe 10,000 reservists that were threatening to not show up for reserve duty, there were 60,000 reservists and soldiers in the IDF that said they will never fail to show up for duty. Because it doesn't fit the left-wing narrative, and it doesn't fit the narrative that Israel's on the brink of civil war and that democracy is about to collapse. It doesn't fit that narrative at all. So Makor Rishon, one of the only right-wing Hebrew newspapers in Israel, reported that there was another letter from soldiers in the IDF with a similar statement. They are also signing that they will never fail to show up. And I'll just read you part of it. Quote, "We commanders and officers of special units who have signed below have served in a wide range of special operations in various roles over the course of many years. We have decided to break silence and to step out of the shadows for a moment to say what should be obvious. We will continue to report in the reserves at any time that we are called." And the letter goes on to say similar things to the first one. So now there's tens of thousands. The first 24 hours, they had 60,000 soldiers that signed these letters, probably much higher right now. They're just so tired of the absolute just lies and threats coming from this small handful of people that the media is reporting to be like a large percentage of the nation of Israel is going to bring the country into civil war and collapse. That they're finally stepping out. The right wing voters in Israel are finally making their voices heard. You know, the media is saying 500,000 people protesting in the streets. Well, guess what? 500,000 people also protested in support of the judicial reforms. A couple other myth-busting things on the judicial reform. Just today, an article came out in Arutz Sheva that's also the Israeli police issued a statement because there was so much misinformation coming out that there's, quote, "no wave of volunteer police quitting the force." They said, the Israeli police said in a statement, quote, "there is no wave of quitting of volunteers due to the protests. This is just fake news, and we regret that there are those who have given them a platform despite the data. So far, 69 requests have been received from volunteers to freeze or stop their volunteering with the police. In addition, the Israel police cut the volunteer positions of 13 volunteers who identified themselves as police volunteers when they expressed themselves politically and even used their volunteer service for the benefit of this activity." more fake news coming out. There's, they said that they've had 69 total that have actually quit, and besides the 13 they had to quit, they had to cut because they were actually just political activists trying to serve in the police. Again, another big misinformation is that Israel's economy is going to collapse, and the stock market's going to fall, and investors are threatening to leave the country. Well, guess what? Reuters, of all people, put an article out today saying, reporting that Fitch Ratings has affirmed Israel's A+ sovereign credit rating and stable outlook, saying that the country's public finances are solid. Now, Reuters did take the opportunity to warn Israel that they better be careful with their judicial reform process because it could, threaten Israel's stability in the financial, it could threaten their public finances. But they said right now Israel's finances are solid. So that's also fake news, believe it or not. So what is really happening here? And we could go on and on and on, but what's really happening? Protests, misinformation, threats, they're not actually about the judicial reform process at all. And another article actually came out today. Bibi Netanyahu's putting out, they're putting out official statements that are actually saying this is a well-coordinated, funded, and planned movement to bring down Bibi Netanyahu's government. And they're actually saying that now. And by the way, we said it over and over. We went to the protests, and guess how many people we found that weren't actually there to protest judicial reform? A lot. There's people there protesting Israel's occupation of the West Bank. I got screamed at them, they screamed at me in my face. So many people there just because they were told to be there because a bus came and picked them up. And it's also came out now that Ehud Barak and so many organizations have been funding this. They were planning it 3 years ago. They had it well funded. And even before Netanyahu's government was sworn into office, they had their plans set in motion. And like day one of his coalition being sworn in, like protests hit the streets, right? But Netanyahu in an article that came out today, he basically said the supposed damage to the IDF in Israel is virtually non-existent. So the supposed 10,000 reservists that are threatening to not serve, a lot of them are probably not even needed anyways and wouldn't be much good for service. And also they're just empty threats. And by the way, 10 times that number of people or so, probably by now or more have actually signed letters saying, no, we will always do our duty to serve our country in the IDF and we'll always show up for our service. And he also said that his government should not be ruled by the army no matter what happens. And the bottom line is that it actually is. This is not just reports anymore. We've talked about it over and over that this is actually a well-coordinated and funded movement to bring down Netanyahu's government because there is a group of people that so hate the right-wing conservative movement in Israel that they'll do anything to take it down. If I had to guess what you've been hearing in the media about Israel the last few weeks, I would guess you've seen headlines like this. Israel's occupation kills Palestinian martyr. Brutal or terrorist attack in which Israel's brutal IDF shoots and kills Palestinian teenager. Things like that. Maybe also Israel's on the brink of civil war. 30% of Israel's population is leaving the country. Israel's investors are leaving the country and threatening to move their headquarters elsewhere. This is the end of democracy in Israel. Well, now you've heard the real stories of what's happening, and I'll bet you actually have not heard these in any of the other mainstream media, possibly in any media that you've been watching about Israel. Guys, let me know what you think about this topic down below with a comment down in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can get all. Oh, by the way, our episode 1 of our undercover Palestinian state, de facto state, and the illegal takeover happening in Area C of Judea and Samaria. Episode 1 premiered this past Sunday. You can watch it on the channel, absolutely free right now. You don't want to miss that. So go check it out right now. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the land of Israel. We're here every Monday through Friday with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.